Hi there. Sorry if the sound is a little quiet today. You're going to have to turn up the volume on your video, but we are going to do our video notes for 4.8. So if you are going to title your notes, please title Algebra 1 Video Notes 4.8. And what we are going to talk about today is how to solve. We're going to talk about that's not what I wanted at all. Go back over here. It's called zero product property solving for x. Zero product property. And we're going to solve quadratics today. And you're going to hear that word a lot more. This is one of your vocabulary words. Quadratics. It means it's a polynomial and the leading term has a exponent of 2. Okay, so quadratics look like this. It looks like something x squared plus something x plus a number. Usually it's in the form of a trinomial or a binomial. Here's how we're going to do this. Make sure that you have Cornell notes and that your big ideas are on the right side of your page. And then the work that I do on the screen is going to be on the left side of your page as well. And I want to see beautiful notes when I check your homework. Now, let's start with this first problem. You can title it Example 1. You have A times B is equal to 0. Well, there are a lot of solutions for this. A could be any number in the world, but if B is equal to 0, then this equation is true. So it's either A is equal to 0 or B is equal to 0 or both of them. If A was a different number, when we multiplied B equals 0, then we would still get a true statement. If B was any number and we multiplied A by 0, then it would also still be a true statement. So what I like to do is when I see something, a factor, A and B in this case, A and B are factors. Whoops. When I see this, then I set both factors equal to 0, and that's called zero product property. So let's take a look at another example, example 2. A, B, and C are all still factors. A, B, and C are all factors. And the product of those factors is equal to 0. So that means we have a product called the zero product property, which means either A is equal to 0, B is equal to 0, and or C is equal to 0. And this is a very, very, very special property that goes with factoring. We're going to spend most of our energy trying to get factors of a polynomial, and then from there, our final step to solve is to use zero product property. So here's an example. You're going to write this down and you're going to box it. I'm also going to write down another version of it that only has B. So A equals B. That means A equals 0 or B is equal to 0. And this zero product property is used when we solve. Used for solving. I'm going to show you in the next examples what it means to use the zero product property for solving, but I want to show you the property first so that we can use it in the following part of our notes. So for example number 3, you can go ahead and copy it down. If this video is going too fast, you can always pause the video, copy down the example, and then I'll just meet you right back where you left off. So for example number 3, C, we need to solve for C and D. Solve for C and D in this case. Now, C could be any number, but if D was equal to -3, this would be a true statement. We could put a big check mark and say it's true. Same goes for D could be any number. If C is equal to +5, 5 minus 5, then we would have 0 times any number. And we know the zero property is 0 times any number is still going to be 0. So let me show you how I do this. Watch how I write this. I'm going to get to this point here, and then I'm going to draw two arrows. I'm going to write c minus 5 is equal to 0, and I'm going to split it into two equations, and d plus 3 is equal to 0. And you're going to hear your teacher say that a lot. Once you get to this point and we ask you to solve, I'm going to say, okay, write it as two equations. C minus 5 is equal to 0, D plus 3 is equal to 0. And drawing these arrows is a good best practice that you can do so that you can demonstrate that you understand how to use zero product property. Again, zero product property is for solving for variables. Let's try example 4. There's only like 5 or 6 examples here, and we're already halfway done. So this concept, again, here's what I see. So using my strategic reading, the question, if there were instructions, would just say solve for x. So when I see this problem, I see there are factors, and factors are in parentheses. Factors, usually, mine are usually in parentheses. Factors, they're equal to 0. When I see this, then I know to use zero product property. And so I will label it ZPP for zero product property. That means that my factor is equal to 0. So I draw arrows, and I split it up into two equations. So this is what we mean by using your problem solving skills. If you see a structure like this, a factor times a factor is equal to 0, use your zero product property. So we're going to do 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. X plus 3 is equal to 0. At this point, I write out both of my equations before I solve, because at this point, as a teacher, I can check that you know how to use zero product property. If you're splitting up your equation into two equations, I know you understand how to use zero product property, or ZPP. Okay, I'm going to isolate x here, and it's going to only take 2 steps. The last step is almost always to divide. So I have 1/2. Fractions are okay. I also want to point that out. Fractions are okay. This one, -3. So your answers are solutions. There are 2 solutions in this case. Are x is equal to 1/2 and x is equal to 1/3. I don't know if it's and or. Depends. I don't remember off the top of my head. But both of these solutions would work in this case to make the product of these factors equal to 0. Let's try a couple more that look a little different. Okay. Example number 5 and 6. The instructions are solve for x. And you look at this and you're like, how do I solve this? Don't copy this next part down. Sometimes I see students, when you forget to factor and use zero product property, you'll do something like this. And then you're like confused because you don't know how to solve this. And you're like, how do I do this? What am I, is this a thing? And then I get weird answers. This is a really good non-example of what you're supposed to do. Don't do this. Nah, don't do that. Oh, look, my red pen is coming out. No. Let me show you what you are supposed to do, and I'll do it in blue. Okay, x squared plus x minus 30 is equal to 0. Well, what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to factor first. So factor. To do this, in my scratch paper, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this all smaller, show you what not to do, and then I'm going to move this over. Okay, because over here, I'm going to put my scratch work. And my t-chart, I need factors of -30 that add up to +1. So I'm thinking -6 and 5. No, that gives me -1. How about 6 and -5? That will give me +1. There we go. Use my reverse box method. I can actually do this in my head. If some of you guys are doing this in your head already, that's really good. But I'll just show you the steps for now because we're still learning. Okay, factor out. Da, 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 da. You see how both of these are negative? That's when I know to pull out a negative value as the common factor, especially when both of them are negative. Okay, so my factors are x plus 6 and x minus 5. From here, you have factored. Your factors are set equal to 0, which means you use zero product property next. So draw in 2 arrows. I have x plus 6 is equal to 0, and x minus 5 is equal to 0. So I have x is equal to negative 6. Notice it's the opposite of this because I'm going to do my additive inverse. I'm going to subtract 6 on both sides. I guess I'll still show you guys this. All right, so my two answers are x is equal to negative 6 and x is equal to positive 5. And if you go back and you plug in negative 6 and 5 into this equation, you will end up getting 0 for your answer, which is great. One more example before a summary. Next example, you can write this down. It's x squared minus 9 is equal to 0. So again, my scratch work is over here. I'm just showing you a good way to set up your classwork and your homework. When you see something like this and you need to factor it, instead of cluttering up your notebook on this side, I usually do my scratch work on the right and bring over my beautiful work on the left. So I need factors of negative 9 that add up to 0. This is my multiply and combine t-chart. Negative 3 and positive 3. This is one way to do it is reverse box method, but I also want to bring up that this is the difference of squares, perfect squares. And go ahead and write down this next formula because it's worth it to see it over and over again. If I see something squared minus another perfect square, I already know it's going to be in the form of a minus b, a plus b. So I got to think something squared minus something squared. So now my answer is a minus, x minus 3a. Oh. X minus 3 and x plus 3. And all that is equal to 0. So I'm going to rewrite this. I have factored it. I should actually move this. Okay, I'll move it over here. This should actually be my scratch work. So now I have x minus 3, x plus 3 is equal to 0. I draw in my arrows. Sometimes my arrows are smaller. And x plus 3 is equal to 0. Okay. That's another way to show that you can factor and use zero product property. So big summary. I'm going to help you out with the summary before you just finish writing your own. But number one is if you need to solve a quadratic, maybe in your summary you write down what a quadratic is, or you look at the top of your notes. What did you write down for quadratic? If you did not write down something, maybe you should go back. Okay, solve a quadratic. So you need to factor. And then the second step is to use zero product property. I'm labeling it ZPP because it's shorter to write for me. I have to write it a lot. But that's how you solve a quadratic. You factor and then you use zero product property. The second thing I want to point out is this is to solve a quadratic. What we've been doing previously has just been working on step one. We've been really good about factoring. Take out the greatest common factor, or you use a multiply and combine t-chart, or use difference of perfect squares. All those things we learned in the previous weeks is learning how to factor. This week we're going to do one more step, and that's just to set each factor equal to 0 for zero product property. Okay. Anything else you need to summarize in your notes, write it down in your notes, and then they are going to get checked next time I see you. Okay, bye.